the years that they've jumped into Port Townsend, and for the many more that we hope they will stay. They really have turned this wonderful neighborhood pub into a thriving cultural center for this town, and I'm grateful to them for that. So, when Rose and I were talking about having a book release, right away we were like, let's have it at the pub. So, to the pub. I know, well, all of you, I guess, and you know me, and I wrote a book, and that's why we're here. So, in the process of writing this book, I also started a publishing company with a very dear friend of mine who cannot be here today because he lives in Rome, Luca Arnado, who I met in 2005 when I was a graduate student in Rome on a creative writing program with faculty that many of you might know, like Linda Beards and Rick Kenny, who lives in town with his wife Carol, who are good friends. And I was living in Trastevere, which has become kind of a second home to me. And I was living in Trastevere, and we were at a gallery, and there was an opening happening, and I said, oh, well, I'll come into this little gallery below my apartment. And I read this catalog that had been written for the exhibition, and I didn't really understand the art. I didn't particularly like the art in the show. And then I read this catalog, and I thought to myself, this is the most beautiful art writing that I've ever read, and it made me appreciate the art so much more than I had when I walked in there. And typically, art writing is just dreadful and terrible and pretentious and it's misery, right? And I thought, this is wonderful. Who is this Luca who wrote this? And then I went outside to smoke a cigarette and have a glass of wine. And I see this tall, bespectacled man, and he kind of shouts to somebody he's talking with, "I am Luca!" And so I just walked up to him. This is in 2005. I walked up to him, and I said, "Are you the Luca who wrote this in the catalog?" And he says, "Yes, I am Luca!" And to be fair, Luca actually he spoke pretty good English, but it's much better now, of course, because of my influence. But that was 2005, and we spent that entire night drinking wine on the banks of the Tevere and talking about San Francesco, St. Francis, who I was doing a big project on, and Plato and Socrates and philosophy and literature. Just a wonderful, wonderful man who he's become a brother to me in every shape and form. And we maintained that relationship by writing letters to each other for 10 years. And then eventually email kind of crept in. But because of that epistolary relationship, Andante exists. So 10 years of letter writing and just becoming family through that process. And now that I've gone over there, I've worked over there, I stay with him and his family. He has a 7-year-old Pedro who is a nephew to me, absolutely. That relationship has culminated in this press. And over the years, we had always wanted to do something together. We had collaborated on some little projects here and there, and finally we just said, let's do it. So Andante Books, it's incorporated here. It's an LLC. It's legit. It has a bank account and everything. I have yet to pay taxes, however, so don't tell anybody. And I also smuggled these books. Don't tell anybody. But we really hope to start making books together, about 5 books a year. We focus on literature, hopefully of a somewhat experimental nature. We're going to do art books and art catalogs, and I only have a couple of examples, but this is a project that we did in association with actually a pretty reputable museum in southern Italy for a wonderful Italian modernist painter, Ennio Tamburi. Luca had made really a name for himself as a curator and art writer. He writes for art journals in Italy. So we'll continue to do collaborations like this. We'll do art books, one-off special art books, collaborations, and then children's books. And that's a big deal. When we had a little opening in Rome, in Pineta, which is Luca's neighborhood, at a wonderful little library called Libreria Marini, the Italians really loved the idea that we would publish literature and children's books together. Because too often these things are separated, and children's books actually do very well. It's a thriving arena of publishing. But what is this high culture? What is this high culture that somehow draws a line and says you don't get this and you do? In my own personal work, I struggle with this question, and certainly in the book that I wrote, I wanted to punch that right in the face. The book of Dudley is a book about a dud, and that is honestly all that it is. He is no better and no worse than he appears in the poem. I wanted to write an honest book. I wanted to write a book that, as Reed Everett said, had when Reed, can you wave to everybody? He's behind here. Reed was behind the wall, Canyon, and was an editor on the project and did a fabulous job. And I assume that we're going to lose him out of town, which is a shame. But thank you, Reed. I owe you a great debt of gratitude. Reed called Dudley vile, and then he looked at me as if I would be offended by that, and my eyes lit up, and I said, yes, exactly. I was thrilled. I was thrilled by that response. He is who he is, and I wanted that honesty to translate into a story about somebody who just goes through the world, and you don't know why he's a dud. You'll never know. You know, he had certain things about him that obviously have impacted him, or caused certain areas of trauma, which everybody has, and yet he persists. He is a persistent man, and there's some language to that extent in the book. There's no redemption. I wanted a character that is as much of a dud at the end as he is at the beginning, and that will disappoint some readers. But the idea is that he's at least persuasive enough that you want to spend some time with him, even in his vile moments. So I thought I would read for you guys a little bit. But I did want, it's called the Book of Dudley because this is the Book of Dudley. It literally is a book. I started it, and when the last page was finished, the book was done. It's a it was a total manuscript. I carried this around for some years as I wrote on it. The form changed. Anybody's willing to, you're welcome to come and take a look at it. And literally, the last page, this is the notes about the painting that you'll hear a little bit about. Did people see Rose's amazing poster that's on the window? Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, good.
Very good.
This is a good time, in fact. Rose, would you please stand?
Must I?
You must stand. I had started this book years ago and had kind of off and on started to work on it and then started to take it seriously. And as I was almost, finished with it, quote unquote, although there was actually quite a bit of work still to do, I met Rose in Port Townsend, and she started doing some design work for Clemente. She's an amazingly talented illustrator. Many of you know her. She's done a lot of work in collaboration with other artists, like Sam. What's Sam's last name? Maynard, and some other artists in town. Really, I think, wonderful. Well, she's become a dear friend. And she's insanely talented, and we're just very lucky to have her in Port Townsend. And we were talking about these posters she was doing for Clemente, and she was kind of like, "Look, Rose, I know you don't really like doing this, but at least I can give you some money for this." And I said, "What would you like to do if you could do something, a project? What would you want to do?" And she said, "I just want to work on something a little bit more sustained, something that is a project." And I said, "Well, what about illustrating the Book of Dudley?" And she somehow accepted to do that, and the results are these beautiful illustrations. I don't even know how many.
I didn't even know. I didn't necessarily think that you were serious. When you asked me, it was kind of that kind of thing. Like, oh, sure, of course I'll do the illustrations. Like, just let me know when the book is done, kind of thing.
But I was serious. I was serious, and she really was instrumental to me finishing this project. Without her motivation, without her doing these drawings, it was just static. It was stuck. And I'll say more about that later because I want to honor some folks and some memories in here. But Rose was just absolutely critical to this process, and I know for a fact this book is as cool as it is because of her illustration. So thank you, Rose. All right, I promise I will try not to keep you for too long. Right before I came over here, I've been partying all weekend, and I've been getting into character. I slept in this shirt last night. If you hug me, just be aware I haven't showered in 2 days. My feet are filthy.
Thanks for telling us.
When Luca first heard, I gave a talk about St. Francis in Rome that summer in 2005. He came up to me afterward, and it was an intense talk. It was a big presentation. There were a lot of people there. And Luca came up to me afterward, and I said, "What did you think?" He said, "I am embarrassed for you." And initially, I took that harshly. I thought, oh my God, like it was that bad. And then what I realized was that what he meant was that he was embarrassed because of how open I made myself. I guess that is just a function of the work that I do. And this book is like that too. I keep telling people Dudley is not me. Of course he is not, but obviously there is a lot of me in Dudley because I wrote this fucking book, you know? So that's what it is. I've been rereading Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and there's an epigraph in the book from this wonderful text of Nietzsche. I've been reading it on the crapper for a number of years now. I read it very slowly, right as it's, you know. And I thought this would be a good epigraph for the reading. This is called About the Spirit of Gravity. My mouth is the people's mouth. I talk too rough and bluff for the silken-eared bunnies, and my words sound even stranger to all the inkfish and penhounds. My hand is a fool's hand. Woe to all tables and walls, and wherever else there is room for fool's gold, fool's bold. My foot has a horse's hoof. With it I trample and trot over sticks and stones, criss and cross, and I'm devilishly joyous for all my fast galloping. My stomach, can it be an eagle's stomach? For it loves lamb best. That's for Brendan, who unfortunately is not here. Is he here? Maybe he won't come. At any rate, it is a bird's stomach, nourished by innocent things and by little, impatient to fly off. Such is my manner. Surely there is something of the bird about it, and especially my hostility to the spirit of gravity in a bird's way. And I am really hostile, its death enemy, arch enemy. Oh, where hasn't my hostility flown and strayed in its flight? I could sing a song about it. I will sing a song about it, though I am alone in my empty house singing to my own ears. And there are other singers, to be sure, whose throat is not mellowed, whose hand is not expressive, whose eyes are not meaningful, whose hearts are not awake until they have a full house. I am unlike them. The Book of Dudley, a poem in 5 parts with a preface by the author, illustrations by Rose C. Burke. For all the duds like Dudley. 2 epigraphs to the book. In man or fish, wriggling is a sign of inferiority. That's from Moby Dick. And then from a talk that I actually heard at the fort, this guy, Charles Furnihue, memory is a real magpie. Preface. What if you just did what you were told, and some were good at it, and some got old? Dudley was a dud of sorts, always forgetting his things. The world seemed so cold at times and dark against his mind. Even breakfast felt strange, an affront too sweet for harsh sensibilities and Dudley's keen critiques. Sitting in the cafes, music is so intentional, thought Dudley. Playlists and primroses and promiscuous baristas that never look his way, preferring the boys and girls who seem to fit right in. Maybe if I had my pencils, mused Dudley, I might do something about all of this. Dudley gives blood for money at the hospital on the hill, believing the sterilized reality of needles and a good draining like leeches in the medieval imagination just suck out the sickness. Wherever death abounds, Dudley's there. But he's not a sicko, doesn't do the zombie thing or give 2 shits about vampires. Heard on the radio the other day that vampires were rabid. Fits the whole bill of disease, said the pathologist. Aversion to garlic, bright light, insatiable beasts, the animal mad, no mind for the match, poor creature. Can you imagine the pain of never-ending thirst? Pretty sure there's a Greek myth for that, Dudley would write if he had his things. But there are other distractions. Love, his mother would say, before she checked out and left all the children without care. We're all orphans of the same mother. Ship of fools, I've got no taste for modern politics or media. My creative ambitions have done up and gone. Even this weekly periodical limps along in my hands. Dudley is off and dreaming again. Action is for the middle class. Leave defiance to the poor. What is my self-law, self-questions Dudley? My autonomous being, my high-spirited horse refusing the bit. After giving blood, Dudley goes on a long walk. He smokes some dope and tries to get lightheaded and weak. Lying down on a park bench, spinning sky above him, a seagull, the sky an aperture, and Dudley looking through it, unaware of the light mist falling and passers-by who regard him as a bum. Dudley is somewhere out there where his things are eternally waiting, his pencils, pocket knife, a small book of drawings, and pressed flowers. Dudley goes to the art museum to take a shit. To be fair, Dudley loves art, but this art museum is free, so it's a no-hassle affair, which helps his bowel movement. And to clear up another thing, Dudley is not a bum. He's got a bum mind, sure, thinks like a bum, always looking for a bargain, which is something for nothing if you ask Dudley. After delivering his dirty little secret, Dudley walks through the galleries. There is one painting in particular called Sin he really likes, and not only because the dark-haired woman is in the nude. Come to think of it, she might be a blonde, but god damn it, the painting is gone, so Dudley can't recall all the details, only the breasts inviting his filthy mind to wrap around that body like a snake, which even Dudley knows represents the original sin, and the eyes of that viper and the soft pink nipples. Dudley might have another dirty secret to share. Dudley discusses the weather with an old man. Rainin', says the old man. Yep, says Dudley, but the sun's shining somewhere. Wouldn't that be nice? Always is, if we have faith, and always going to come again. In matters of faith, Dudley usually defers to probability. When he was in college and the professor held his pencil in the air and asked whether anybody could with complete certainty say the pencil would fall to the table if he dropped it, well, Dudley, along with the rest of the class, certainly could not say. So ever since, faith had been what was most likely going to happen. Dudley was going to say something about snow in the mountains, but figured it most likely the old man didn't ski. That's something probable, though. In winter, when it rains at sea level, we can assume snow in the mountains. This feels good, having faith in the seasons. Wishing to share this sentiment, Dudley is suddenly alone on a frigid peak bereft of life, awash with indeterminacy, his only probability fainting in the freezing wind. So I had written that preface actually a number of years ago, just starting with this line that had come to me, Dudley is a dud of sorts, always forgetting his things. And then I just set it aside, and I was in Italy in 2017 teaching there in Rome, and I went on a trip to Sicily, which was absolutely, just astonishing. And I lost a manuscript that I'd been working on. A manuscript for a book that maybe I'll write at some point, but it was called A World Once Common. And again, I write by hand and I write in books, and so it was just gone. I mean, there, hundreds of pages just gone. Hopefully, maybe some Italian found it and is, pissing on it or whatever.
You'll probably continue it.
Yeah, well, that's what I was hoping too. Yeah. So anyway, I came home and and I was like, oh, that's a bummer. That work is gone. But it was just kind of notes anyway. And then I realized that this book was sitting here, and I just started to work on it again. And so over the last few years, this book really came to play. This is for Jacqueline in the pub. 1. Dudley sat in the pub with a schooner of dark ale. All around were signs of life, both in and out of time. This fellow over here, well, he might be from a forgotten age, lost at sea in some ill-fated, tall-masted ship, and every coin of sunken treasure, some cruel trick to show men of fortune their foolish ways. But here he is, nonetheless, at ease with a drink, resurrected from a spiny, barnacled dream. For Dudley, history is nothing out of the ordinary. He sees surrounded by years against better judgment. It's hard to know so much when you're just a dud like Dudley. Nobody listens and your voice is an alarm to stay away. Keep your distance, kids. That man has eyes in past worlds. You can't trust an old seer unless he's blind. Poor Dudley, his gifts are too classic for modern appreciation. Even his lovers have been ancient, their orgasms archaeologic. He prefers the company of forlorn souls with universal grief. Bury me in the moor where my heart can sing the old sagas. Wherever ghosts rise in uncanny vapors, will you find my cursed lament. One of Rose's beautiful illustrations. Please come up, even if you don't buy a book, just come up and look at these illustrations because they're really amazing. This is for Luca. This is one of his favorite parts of the book. 6. These are from part 1. Dudley's listening to Gould play the Goldberg variations, staring out the window at the snow. There's so much shit, and yet the snow cleans the slate. This too is shit, of course, but it sounds good to Dudley. Looks pleasant enough. reminds of a childhood that never existed, some corny Christmas songs written by commie Jews. Dudley would have made a good commie and a pretty good Jew, but never had it much for politics, and only on occasion ever gave much thought to the sweet hereafter. More of a skeptic, not about the big man, but what kind of space would that be anyhow? Sure don't believe in the big rock candy mountain, although Dudley could go for some whiskey right quick. Trickling down the mount or out the bottle don't make much difference. Dudley did play the piano in his youth, remembers the cool, smooth keys and the long sound of a vibrating note, how it would hang there in the empty air, not filling it up, but adding to the emptiness. Before the doors closed, there was the piano and his mother, turning the pages of the playbook as he practiced. These are hard memories, harder than all the girls, also before nobody wanted to touch him no more, and the brief moment when it seemed things might work out. No matter. Those days are gone, and Dudley still has this old Gould CD that fits his mood just fine in the snow and wishing for a snort. Prefers not to think much about his mother, but there she is bundling him up and his little friends waiting outside to go sledding. Christ, why these pictures got to bother a man trying to sit and think nothing at all. The snow of 80-something, 90-something, so many years of absence and lack and only a few winters worth a damn. Dudley liked the way the piano would talk back to his touch as if 1,000 words were hidden inside, just waiting for a little tickle and the air contracting until there was nothing but Dudley and the black dot of the universe, all that emptiness, afraid to spoil the last faint sound, and Dudley left to himself. Piano gone, mother gone, a white emptiness of snow erases out the window in memory. Friends gone to sled some impossible hill at the edge of town, which is really just a metaphor of Dudley's consciousness trying too hard to hold on to Gould and his slow notes, knowing that genius is only temporary too. We come back to our sadness, all else. So the book is written, I'm calling it a poem, but there's a lot of prose in it, so if you're afraid of poetry, don't worry, you'll find friendly prose in here too. I mean, vile friendly prose. Speaking of Dudley's vile side, it is Father's Day. We didn't realize that it was Father's Day when we decided to have this reading today, which is a joke because Dudley is totally like the anti-father. And so I'm going to read one of the more offensive passages. Dudley meets a girl. Not quite a girl, a woman. But what's a woman anyhow? Never gave no time to Dudley, so start with a girl who wants her daddy. Dudley sure ain't that, but knows what it means to feel empty for reasons out of your control. So Dudley can play daddy and tell this pretty girl how everything sure is shit. A good daddy shouldn't hide nothing big like that, kinda obvious. Look around, little girl. Look at all the assholes lying out their teeth to get ahead, using their power to avoid the inevitable. How about you and me look that shit straight in the eye and smoke one of these crooked joints and sit by the water watching the birds float by? We can write poems with beauty bark and fuck up all the landscaping. We'll crush our empties and stack them in mockery of all the new real estate. We'll grimace and sneer and snarl at the Starbucks moms and Amazon bros. We'll fart loudly into the October breeze. Yeah. Dudley ain't much of a role model, but he's ultimately harmless and fiercely loyal, so if any creep tries to fuck with this darling little misery box, he better watch out. Dudley can't afford to get real drunk, but is a mean buzz if provoked. Although, to be fair, Dudley's normally the one doing the provoking. It's all a wash. Dudley knows things don't much change, except in the worst ways, so soon enough he'll be the only one at the water's edge talking to the birds. Been that way the whole time, in fact. Never was no girl, never was no Daddy Dudley. Only the need. Dudley follows a trail of snails, which might be rocks, which might be memories from his troubled past. Dudley needs to get his eyes checked. There was a big bird on the water. It looked like a log maybe, or some kind of other bloated sea creature. Dudley was curious, so he threw a rock way, way out. Been a long time since Dudley used his throwing arm. He felt it all the way through his shoulder. The bloated bird didn't make any motion at all, just floated on toward the ferry dock. So Dudley hustled and caught up. As it started to drift past the piling, saw that it was a bird, some big fucking goose, some strange visitor from the north, and not no normal Canada goose, a visitor. Dudley saw it for a sign. I'm going to read this one from Melody. I'm not going to keep you guys for too long, I promise. If Melody, Sky Eisler, who's become a good friend of mine and is just a wonderful resource to this community, has offered to do a reading at the library where she's even going to pay the man a little skizzy. And there's going to be food. It'll be nice. It'll be formal. Not that this isn't quite formal. You guys are also quiet. I need Nadine here, my friend Nadine, who would be in the back just like shouting.
We can tackle you.
Yeah, good, yeah. we used to go to readings together and sneak in whiskey and just like get totally belligerent at these like fancy poetry readings in Seattle because fuck fancy poetry readings. Dudley is in the library. Oh, a fun fact about this: Melody thinks that this might be the first book that ever actually was like uses the library as is like set in the library. So this section, I wrote this in the Carnegie Reading Room, and she thinks that it is the first book ever to have the library as a featured place, which is cool. That's a nice distinction for Dudley. Yeah, go libraries, right? Dudley is in the library. This is for Jim Alden. Dudley is in the library. It's quiet here and free, even if there ain't no beer. But also ain't no beer that Dudley can't afford to drink anyhow. So it's a kind of peace to be without. Reed, I remember he was like, this is like a crazy double negative, but it's supposed to be that way. Also ain't no beer that Dudley can't afford to drink anyhow. So it's a kind of peace to be without. But Dudley came for another reason too. To see some paintings of an old friend long dead. All over the library, Jim's paintings are sad and beautiful. There's a poem on the wall calling him nuttier than a squirrel turd, and that's true. In many of these paintings, it's winter and there is snow, even though it hardly snows in this town, but maybe once, twice a year. Dudley remembers how much Jim loved the gray, figures he painted all that white to accentuate the sky and water. Only one painting at sunset, which Jim used to say people want to put on their walls, but that ain't where the real color is. That kind of deep color is in the sadness and cold and come every day when the snow don't fall except irregular. Jim was that kind of guy. Dudley ain't the loneliest man around, but today at the library he's got Jung's big red book, and it seems too damn big to take it all in. Reads by translation. He who sleeps in the grave of millennia dreams a wonderful dream. He dreams a primordially ancient dream. He dreams of the rising sun. Maybe. Right now, Dudley just misses his friend and wishes he had a beer. Thinks back to days on the deck of Sirens and Jim crazier than all sorts of turds and still making perfect sense. Looking out and talking about how many colors are in all that gray. He wasn't just sad, he was poor too, and so the beer never lasting long enough and the night too quick to come, and the cruel wind would chase the not drunk enough drunks inside, and then there was nothing but empty dreams. Seems no matter how primordial a man can get, there still ain't much to make up for an empty pocket. This sounds more like it. I beg because I am empty and am a beggar. There was no chance to make a good living with gray paintings, and even Van Gogh only sold one notable work during his life, although probably traded plenty for booze and sex. Dudley would trade his right arm for sex right now, but would rather keep begging for booze. Wonder if Jung's got a dream that accounts for inflation. Dudley finds more talk of madness. Madness is divine. Enter into the world of the soul and you are like a madman. Is this supposed to be comforting, doctor? No, because you are sick and must carry forth that knowledge and live in the world being as a patient of the divine. Dudley, Dudley, where did you lose your keys? Where did you lose your hat? In all the days and all the years, did you really believe it would end like that? My knowledge has 1,000 voices, an army roaring like lions. Jung's book is like Blake, powerful and perverted, capturing all the sacred stars and all the lowly worms. Each ripple and wave is divine, each footprint in the mythical snow. And as ever, now in the company of his long dead friend, Dudley returns to all he cannot know.
Woo! Ow!
All right. We'll move forward here. How you guys doing? You got like 5-10 more minutes?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of dreams, there's a lot of memories in here. I'll read this one for Reed because he wrote a really cute little comment on the margin that was like, this is funny. Is anybody who works at Finisterre here? No offense. Dudley nurses a bloody and consoles his noggin. Dudley's head is pounding something fierce. Dudley's head is a rocket launcher, and Korea better be careful because this motherfucker is locked and loaded. Entree des artistes, the sign reads above the kitchen. More like entree des bitches, Dudley thinks. Because that's what his mind is doing right now, feeling sorry for the numb throb of booze and dancing and not enough pretty girls to take Dudley home. Not enough girls, period, pretty or not, since Dudley's not particular picky these days, but way particular drunk, so that might have something to do with it. Still did some dancing, although, stepped on a few toes and don't remember much, but Dudley is never a careful man, just curious and persistent. Those days burn past like suns and stars, and Dudley is sore all over his back, his broken wrist and his broken hand. His broken wrist, his corpus like a floating, bloated log out in the sound. Did Dudley tell you about that bird he saw? Thought it was a creature alive. Oh, he did. He sure did tell that tale, but man alive, that bird sticks in his mind as a good hangover does, waiting for the next phase of existence. But what comes next? Whatever comes next. Another artiste, perhaps, with big ideas and a full heart, ready to ask all the right questions, even though nobody gives a flying fuck. Or maybe it's a messenger of another kind, the one who lurks around corners and offers you a smoke when times are tough, and Dudley always abides. This is one of my favorite illustrations in the book, too. Okay, we're going forward. Luke and I had a big conversation about the opening line to this poem, which is one of the dumbest lines in the poem. But initially I was trying, if anybody speaks even a little Italian, the word for penis is penna, and the word for pen is like penna. So that is a very close approximation. So it is very difficult when you are a writer and you need a pen, and I'm like constantly like, don't ask for the penis, don't ask for the penis, you know? So I put this in, I was like, in Italian, the word for penis and pen is very similar, and Luca was like, this doesn't make sense to me, they're different words. And I was like, what the fuck? As cool as you are sometimes, Jesus Christ. Yeah. Anyway, so now, the word for penis and pen is very similar, which in English it doesn't, but pen is penis, The word for penis and pen is very similar. If this is by design, Dudley don't know. Dudley admires the countryside and takes a sip of whiskey. Dudley is on the train and contemplating America. Now in the thawing north, and the trees are swampy, and the fields are brown. This cannot be real, this stolen land, frozen land, a land of single harvests, unforgiving, faded. The train reveals backyards full of trash, bones, strange scavengers, probably some retired hippies squirreled away in old farmhouses. This is an American train. And then Rochester, Buffalo was queen of the Rust Belt. Here we are in the stony recesses of Dudley's childhood, where nary a tinkling fairy dairy to hide. Oh no, the bricks are too red and sooty for that, the smokestack's too high. So Dudley remembers pre-industrially, the factories too fat. One of the hardest parts of making the book was a very obvious thing that as a total novice. And just a real quick shout out, thank you to Joseph Bednarik, who many of you probably know, who has been a real mentor and inspiration to me to make books. So very grateful that he's here. Thank you for coming, Joseph. One of the things that, you know, when you make a book, you realize that there are just little particular practicalities that obviously need to be dealt with, such as the page is only so large and the lines are so long that they need to be reconciled somehow. So I like to write in long line. I take the tradition of narrative poetry very seriously, and I really like to write long lines. And so I had written this whole part 4 was written in Italy thanks to my first writing residency, which was very exciting, that Luca totally just like handed to me. So again, thanks to Luca. But I got to spend some time in this amazing little village called Colle di Torra. And that's when this book really became serious, because at that point it was literally just in the manuscript, and so that I was able to spend time there and type it into the computer, really kind of see the structure, see how it might want to be arranged. And then I wrote this 4th part there entirely. But I wrote it in long line, and then we wanted to make a book that could fit in your pocket. It's designed to fit in your jacket pocket, but it can also fit in a lot of back pockets. Of course, you know, when I got to Italy and we were like, all right, let's do it. We were like, okay, this is the size of the book. What are we going to do with these long lines? Well, they had to be cut, and that created a real kind of artistic challenge. So I'm still not even sure how I feel about the results of that, but I did a lot of editing work while I was there cutting these lines. But in my mind, I always thought of one of my favorite lines from Socrates, which is to be a good, basically, wordsmith, you have to know how to cut words up like a butcher. Know where exactly where the bones and the meat come together. So also, to Brendan and Teresa, wherever you are, thanks for the lamb. We just had this big epic party, and Brendan roasted some amazing lamb. Butchered it. With Hannah. Hannah's not here yet. Anyway. Dudley, this is a really powerful Dudley illustration.
That's my favorite.
Everyone's book. Page 83 for those with books in hand. Dudley leaves behind no heirs, has nothing to give anyhow. His apartment a testament, neglected over the years, painting and photographs, books and ephemera, meant something once, when proximity was not a concept, when people wanted to be close. Now his archive gathers could-have-beens, waiting for a bright young scholar who will never come. Dudley's artifacts never fondled by soft hands. It could have been more romantic if some masterwork lay unfinished, rather than Dudley's dirty whites. He once made his readers feel special, composing honest lines in a fake surround. His words broke through determined lies, fears of caring in the old way, the walking at evening kind of way, whence families repair hidden traumas, taking for granted how we pray silently, an untranslatable resolve for meaning's whole. Dudley was a philosopher in his day, insisting there was nothing to it, professionally speaking. If there had been worthier universities, Dudley would have haunted the halls. Instead, wound his watch around street signs, pointed nowhere and favored the free box. Guilt and shame were too conventional. A trope never dies once initiated. Dudley had his work cut out and therefore called it quits. In his own hagiographic melancholy, Dudley resigned to lower powers. Hunger, for instance, developing a complex appetite, confused platonic credulity. Courage, for example, sticking it in vulgar forms, penetrating and participating, leaving prophecy out entirely, but keeping his disgusting twist on madness. An errant knight and a terrible scribe, a shitty co-pilot always cracking beers, changing the station on innumerable radios, drunk and directionless, singing unforgivable genres, Dudley came to anti-gravitational solitude, pushing everything apart. Okay. Is it getting heavy in here? What's going on? Okay, let me go to part 5. The acknowledgments, are obviously a big deal for any book, but this is the first book, and certain people will tell you that that's a big accomplishment, but, thanks to Joseph again for handing me this lovely little book called So Many Books, which I totally pilfered this epigraph in the acknowledgments. Really, this is just paper, and it goes in the trash. So it is nothing more than the air and the space that we have right now. I don't, I'm glad for it. I'm happy that Dudley is here, but cellulose it will become. But I do want to acknowledge my grandfather, both my grandfathers, Ray Parafinzik and David Spesser, who Ray died a couple years ago when I was in Italy and wasn't able to return for the ceremony, which really broke my heart, but we're about to go and bury my grandfather in Buffalo in a few weeks, and so that's a big deal. To my aunt, Inga, who was a huge influence and was a part of this, to my mentor and professor at the UW, who died before I finished my dissertation, but really kind of brought me to the end there, Herb Blau, and then of course to Jared, who is a big part of this book as well. Because he was with me as I wrote the end. I found out, so Rose, just a real quick story, I'll try not to drag this down. Rose and I went to Port Angeles because I was freaking out. I was in a real bad place. I was freaking out and I said, I need to get out of town. And I asked Rose if she would come with me to Port Angeles so we could finish this book. It just literally, there was like a few pages. I mean, the actual pages left. And she hadn't finished the illustrations, and so she was like, yeah, let's do it. So we went and we holed ourselves up in this terrible, shitty fucking motel called the Aircrest.
It was great.
Yeah, which is honestly, nice. I mean, it is a degenerate paradise there, which is what I wanted. I wanted, Dudley needed to be kind of with his people when this book came to its end. And that was on Wednesday. That we left on Wednesday night, the night that Jared died, which was weird. And I only found out on Friday, because I kind of turned my phone off and I'm not on social media. And so I found out in the ferry terminal of Bainbridge Island. I was on my way to Portland for this big writing festival to try to hand out flyers to promote the book. And was just totally, totally rocked. So he was absolutely with me as literally the last lines of this poem were composed. And, I hope that some of these words will continue to honor him. When they flooded the valley, so all four parts are in the third person, Dudley, 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 and then the fifth part switches to the first person, which was an experiment, and I wasn't sure how it was going to work, and I was like, if it doesn't work, I'm just going to cut it, but then I left it, so we'll see what that does for people who read it. When they flooded the valley, my father was away at school. When he returned, the house was surrounded by water. He stayed up all night, watching the lake. This confrontation with failure is a recognition of need. I've held it so long. I've fed in the trash of culture. What is there for me to give back? I've chased it and end up returning like all my best efforts, searching through the words of others, songs of others, beauty of others. A greeting is all I can ask after time apart, fearing the space between. Falling into it is not so bad. Oh God, deliver me unto that common world, all else. The hand of pity. What can I do? The bird from my broken heart remains in the center of the sun. Garbage is the new black. What are the terms of composition? I've seen the dangers of being alone, turning myself away. So to come back down the mountain, not following but also not afraid of hoof path, where elk and bear lead into the city, drinking from the common fountain. If I had kids, I would want them to play in the streets and stay out late. I would take another beer and listen to the night sounds until the poem crept from its sanatorium of calamity. Here we are, it says, and stays that way. I've come here to make a decision. This is literally the wall behind the Aircrest Motel, which is actually this is amazing. I've come here to make a decision. With a song in my head, I mumble my way to the motel door. Looking out, I see cars full of lives, full of garbage. In every car, someone waits for something to happen, for some surprise announcement to set them free. I would wait there too. I've come to be more of myself, looming through repetition. Not sure if these are storefronts familiar, I slink by westward toward the water. I need a surefire slogan, a banality of evil barely visible, but also laid bare. Salutations to my friends, my street urchins, my barmaids and hags and hovel hunters. May we all share the rotten earth tonight, nurtured on mud flats and acres of clams. I watch the sunrise. Along with the others stupefied by morning, they stand outside on balconies in hotels I cannot afford, with views the same as mine in the great equality of beauty. I walk slowly to the bus stop, pull out my last cigarette, smoke flush to the filter. This is what she always taught me. You will be alone forever. Do not be discouraged by this. You are doing what you're told. There is a plan even for Dudley, a magisterial shitstorm designed just for you. Your kingdom is eternal. It flowers in springtime, freezes in winter. You are alone, but in good company. Keep to the fringes, to the places you know best. You will be recognized and common. When you cross the great waters, always sit so you can see the mountain. My voices belong to me and I cherish them. I acknowledge all the inspiration and sadness, each teacher and detractor, books I've read, women I've longed to touch, those I've touched and longed to hold. Where I've gone wrong is my greatest misfortune. Dudley's deception is powerful medicine. Dudley's deferral is no longer an option. Dudley is always forgetting his things. Some days the view is obscured. I sit in the middle of the boat, thinking about my passage, friends who are gone. I walk to the shrouded bow, throw coins for our fare across. As we've done for decades, we'll go to the art museum for solace and to take a solid dump. There will be a painting to leave a lasting impression. We will describe this painting, then be done with it. It will be your turn to decide. The mother of all creation, foreground to the mountain, there are snakes at her feet. She clutches a fish. She is dark and naked. Dudley concentrates on her center, on the vibrant fish with mouth agape as if to suckle her breast. The fish eye is black and open. Dudley slips in, hews against the wind. Rustling her leaves, she bends to rearrange each letter its own word. She needs only 4. We are all duds. The books are for sale. I'm happy to sign them. Actually, all of these copies, we printed 200, and I legitimately smuggled them back into America from Italy. All of them are numbered and signed, but I'm happy to inscribe the front. A deal. Rob was really gracious to let me buy a bunch of chips so I can subsidize your drinking. Book and a beer, $20. I'll give you a token. Obviously, you can get wine or whatever with that. And Luca's book is here. It's a lovely little novella. It's really beautiful. I don't have that many copies, but it's called Sail On. It's about an old man who discovers that he is going to die, and he just kind of throws it all to the wind. And it takes place in Italy and this amazing island called Lampedusa, where they have a lot of sea turtles, which is really cool. But it's a delightful little novella and really beautiful. All of our books are going to have art in them. Hopefully, that is the idea. We want to create readers, not just sell bullshit.
Nice.
Anyway, thank you all for coming.